Hold your posture. Corvin Dax didn't whisper. He didn't have to. The command carried the weight of a courtroom verdict, spoken with the precision of a man who understood that history wasn't recorded, it was witnessed. The grand hall of the Galactic Concord thrummed with quiet disdain. Every sound felt deliberate. Clawed fingers, tapping crystalline panels. Fronds rustling against diplomatic silks. Electrostatic robes, shifting as species adjusted themselves for comfort, not respect. Across the dais, Vecran Chancellor Cern Volrek tilted his cranial crest in mocking amusement. The translator disc embedded on his collar flashed briefly red for sarcasm. He did not blink. Corvin's hands rested lightly on the data scroll before him, fingers unmoving. He continued his address, eyes fixed on the center lens above the Concord crest, not on the faces smirking behind it. Mutual sovereignty, he said flatly, requires more than policy. It requires discipline, accountability, equilibrium between dominance and restraint. Humanity offers both, and the interruption didn't come through sound, but through movement. A blur of silver and crimson armor clanged across the chamber's central bridge. General Vroth Marek of the Karan Dominion marched with theatrical slowness, the serrated shoulder plates of his battle armor scraping the stone columns as he passed. He reached the Earth delegation side of the platform, eyes glowing faintly with bioreactive pigment. Without asking, he tore the Earth Seal banner from its stand. The cloth didn't tear. It cracked, the woven sealant mesh folding as he brought it low. He pressed it to the ground, then with one grinding step crushed it beneath the full weight of his boot. No one gasped. There was no outrage. Only laughter. Some delegates chuckled into their sleeves. Others recorded the moment. A Solvak elder brushed his tusks with a fiber comb while muttering, "At last, the beasts know their place." But not all mocked. One Hilaric archivist scribbled furiously. A Yithan observer narrowed his eyes but said nothing. A Terran diplomat blinked rapidly, shifting uneasily in his float seat. Corvin didn't move. Behind him, human delegate Avon Cole adjusted the edge of his sleeve, waiting for a response. None came. Corvin reached down and lifted the banner. He did not shake the dust off. He folded it. Slowly, deliberately, one crease at a time, as if preparing a burial shroud. Then he turned. He did not speak again. They walked back across the marble floor. The boots of Earth's delegation did not echo. The floor swallowed their departure like a courtroom ashamed of its ruling. At the entrance, Avon muttered under his breath, "You could have stopped that, said something." Corvin stared forward, eyes hard as tempered obsidian. So could the rest. Behind them, the Conquer resumed its schedule. Next on the agenda, trade tariffs with the Loren Syndicate. The great doors closed, and Earth left. 3 days later, Naval Substation Elion 6 pinged Earth Command with a request for new star chart patches. The response was a single data packet, access denied. The communications officer tried again. Different encryption layers, different ports. Each time, access denied. His commanding officer told him not to escalate. They're probably updating protocols, it'll resolve by rotation. It didn't. By the end of the day, every Earth ambassadorial node across the Concord logged out. No logout message, no farewell, only closure. Shipping manifests vanished from Allied networks. Human trade ships did not report late. They didn't report at all. Civilian routes marked Earth vessels as null-tracked. Their trajectories dissolved into noise. Still, the Concord laughed. In the Slovakian broadcast, a comedy segment showed cartoon humans sulking in their caves. On Vecran Infotank's satirical dramas portrayed Earth as an extinct species preserved in museums. On Varnak Prime, the new exhibit at the Cultural Repository was titled The Tempered Flame, A History of Human Limitation. In the Concord Hall, the smudge from the crushed Earth Seal banner remained. No one cleaned it. The chamber's janitorial drones were programmed to ignore it. 10 days after the hall, The navigation systems of the 7th Concorde Patrol Armada began dropping coordinates mid-sleet. No system errors were logged. A week later, the Helleric Observation Array recorded a human freighter flicker into high space, then vanish on a vector no chart recognized. An automated distress call from Concorde Fleet Gamma 12 never reached its terminal. Instead, all receivers broadcast a fragment loop of unknown audio. This is not vengeance. This is a final measure against arrogance. The recording stopped before anyone could trace it. Across the Concorde, stations defaulted to backup protocols, but none of them contained Earth codes anymore. 4 weeks later, Admiral Rin Velgor of the Yalari Confederacy addressed the Concorde. "We've reviewed data from 10 border fleets. They're not lost. They're gone. Erased." Chancellor Volrek reclined, his voice bored. "Perhaps you've misplaced them. Perhaps the humans are simply hiding." Rin flung a fist against the projection table. "They're not hiding. They're cutting. They're trimming the galaxy like a gardener prunes rot." No one laughed that time. In the shadows of a dormant Earth listening post deep beneath the icy crust of Europa, an operator reviewed a final signal from the Concorde Hall. He paused the feed on one image, the moment Vrothmarek's heel ground the Earth seal into stone. He tagged the file with a simple label, Catalyst. Then he uploaded it to Stratcom Bastion. It was time. In the void over Neptune, a dormant cruiser stirred. Its armor plates shimmered blacker than shadow, absorbing trace light. On board, cryo-wombs hissed open. A single line blinked across the ship's heads-up display. Project Askfall, Stage 1, authorized. No alarms, no declarations, just activation. In the Sol system, the stars did not flicker. "Aeroline, is Earth still on the relay?" Velyari Trade Overseer Clenth Rar didn't raise his head as he spoke, his fingers continuing their pattern on the command slate. 3 taps, 1 hold. Swipe left. A technician, unsure whether the question was rhetorical, responded anyway. "Negative. Return code registered as disassociation protocol. No secondary relay." Rar finally paused. "Disassociation? Is that even a sanctioned term?" The technician shrugged beneath the weight of his council-issued tunic. "It's not in the archive. Cross-checking now." Above them, the primary array glowed with route lines. Most flickered green, a few flashed amber. Every Earth-linked path had gone black. Not red, not corrupted, not jammed. Vacant. In the Council Chancellery of Eneth Prime, seating arrangements remained unchanged. Yet where humanity's emblem once stood, polished bronze laid against deep mahogany, there was now a slab of gray polymer. No design, no designation. Delegates passed by without acknowledgement. No one moved to fill the space. Some lowered their eyes. Others adjusted their collars. Councillor Revak, of the Lothari bloc, waved the matter off with a snort. "They're playing recluse. Let them. One less mouth at the table." Minutes later, he received a private report. The Earth liaison compound on Velura Prime had shuttered. Auto-locks initiated a blackout sequence. A layer of obsidian fabric, weather-treated and rough to touch, now hung over the entrance. No crest, no welcome tag. He deleted the report without reading further. On the outer stations, trade traffic dwindled. Planetary customs hubs showed Earth shipments as in transit, but they never arrived. Pilots claimed no sightings, no cargo logs, only disrupted tracking. One freighter captain from Ereval sector testified to seeing an Earth-marked vessel through filtered radiation, only to find open space when he rechecked his sensors. At a security hearing, a Karan admiral offered a simple explanation. "They're masking with old stealth tech. They'll reappear when they feel dramatic." Council head Eastravorin leaned forward, antennae twitching. "Then where's the drama?" No answer followed. At the Velari Observatory, Taylor Kent reviewed the latest galactic positioning sync. Dozens of beacons were out of alignment. Specifically, those triangulated through Earth's quadrant. He recalibrated the coordinates. Still wrong. He rotated the measurement axis. The drift widened. He uploaded a diagnostic to the Concord hub. The return message read, "Corrupted baseline, Earth sync offline." He whispered to his assistant. They took their axis with them. Aboard the Concorde, archival vessel Seratus Dwell, language modules for Terran trade codes began displaying null syntax. Not garbled, removed. Historians noted the shift. One archivist, a pale-eyed Vayeri named Ronath, scribbled into his recorder, "Withdraw like a scalpel. Not hacked, not torn. Cut along nerve lines." Weeks passed. Planetary reports trickled in. Human trade enclaves, but empty. Apartments with made beds. Cafes with preserved inventory. Air systems running. Power grids active. But not a single human remained. On Revant Station, footage showed a Terran diplomat leaving his office. He looked directly at the lens, paused, adjusted his cufflinks, and stepped outside. He never returned. The next 25 hours of footage showed the same door, unopened. Then, the feed cut. In the communications wing of Concord Naval Command, Admiral Tressa Ixon reviewed Starlane activity. Her aide handed her a hard-copy log, the kind used only when data security was compromised. It listed 42 Earth-registered signal sources, all now registered as Zero Echo. Not jammed, not redirected. "Start redundancy scans," she ordered. "I already failed, Admiral," her aide said, voice low. "It's like they were never coded in." Ixon set the log aside and activated the embedded heads-up display across the glass of the control terminal. Concord asset locations updated in real time, except Earth entries blinked out, one by one, without noise or notation. A pattern emerged. All exits, no returns. She reached for her headset, then stopped. Her fingers hovered in air, unsure who, if anyone, was still listening. In the main hall of the Selvek Diplomatic Archive, a reception drone maintained ceremonial greetings on loop, facing a sealed chamber draped in Terran blue. A child visiting with a school delegation asked why that room never opened. The guide replied, "Because Earth said goodbye without speaking." On the high orbital deck of the Valari Concord Watchtower, Officer Perrin Dak reviewed energy anomalies. He zoomed into a stretch of unmonitored hyperlane where Concord scouts recently failed to report back. He found data fragments. Partial scans showed lens distortions, stars bending at mathematically impossible vectors. One frame showed an energy ripple that didn't register on any frequency. Another showed a flare of movement. Triangular, dark, not marked with any known species insignia. He sent the footage to command. The reply, "Unverifiable, archive and dismiss." Back at the Eneth Chancellery, a new meeting began. The Karan representative rolled his eyes as the Earth delegation's seat remained unoccupied. "Still indulging their pride," he muttered. Councillor Malin of the Vaseth block raised her voice. "We're mourning something we don't yet understand." Laughter followed. But in the corners, aides took longer glances at the empty seat. A week later, that seat was quietly removed. No replacement took its place. Across Varnek Prime's western precinct, security grids flickered. Not from an overload. The sync pulses from Terran subgrids embedded decades ago simply stopped, aligning. The buildings didn't fail, but the energy profile changed, cooler, slower, as if waiting for a key no one held anymore. A minor mechanic flagged the pattern. His supervisor dismissed it. "They just want attention." The mechanic marked the logs private and encrypted them. He then went home and sealed his windows. At the galactic relay core above Halara 4, pulse frequencies shifted subtly. 1 beat slower, 1 megahertz narrower. When the senior engineer tried to reset the beacon, a message displayed, burned into the system, with no origin tag. Absence is policy. He tried to delete it. The command field didn't respond, and then the first Concord patrol vanished. No beacon, no trail. A third-class scouting vessel later picked up one data pod floating adrift. Inside was a single clip, grainy footage of Earth's Concord seat, empty, draped in gray. A timestamp looped at the bottom. It matched the exact moment Vroth Marek crushed the Earth Seal banner. Across multiple sectors, news feeds began pulling human references from their databases. Not out of censorship, out of unavailability. Like echoes never returned. In the Stratcom bastion deep beneath Earth's crust, Corvin Dax reviewed the sequence on a display pane. He leaned forward, noting the timestamp, the feed ID, the framing of the abandoned seat. He turned to the operations aide beside him. "Send the next phrase." The aide nodded and keyed the relay. Across the Concord's main diplomatic channels, an identical static burst reached every major terminal. It lasted 4.1 seconds. And ceased. No translation, no pattern, just a single universal outcome. Confusion, confirmed by Oki. Now. Commander Tarn Valer's voice didn't rise, it struck. Inside the core chamber of Stratcom Bastion, layered beneath Antarctic ice, buffered by superconductive coils and echo-damp walls, the room obeyed with absolute stillness. The Ashfall command console came to life, its interface glowing in staggered panels of crimson and cobalt. Not a single diode blinked. No startup chimes. No welcoming animation. Just function. Tarn stepped forward. The veins under his wrist had already been coded for initiation. He pressed his palm flat against the ignition cradle. A low shimmer crawled across the terminal. Verification required not just fingerprints, but skeletal density, microvascular patterning, and pulse rhythm modulation. The scan took 4 seconds. The system cleared. Command-level access granted, the AI stated in a tone that was clipped, devoid of synthetic warmth. From the upper gantries, a technician adjusted the stabilizer locks around the graviton lens arrays. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everyone in the chamber knew what this meant. On the far wall, a heads-up display flared into view, projecting the current tactical grid of the Sol system. Earth sat at its center, not marked by a symbol, but by absence. Every defense node, long presumed dormant, now gleamed with new connections. Paths drawn in irregular angles reformed in real time. 12 Null Veil squadrons standing by, came a report from the lower bay. They weren't called stealth fleets anymore. These vessels didn't merely hide. They refused registration. Their hulls refracted matter light, folding visual patterns into localized voids. Sensors read them as data artifacts. Even shadow arrays could barely chart their displacement. Tarn nodded once. "Bring up strike sequence 1. Hold for full protocol sync." In the adjacent neural interface chamber, Varen Koss worked with fingers never resting. His gloves were threaded with impulse filaments, dancing across relay arcs embedded directly into the data wall. Cyber warfare in Project Ashfall wasn't about brute force. It was mimicry, layered with corruption. He injected synthetic packet trails into Concor's relay structure. Ghosts of messages that never existed. False confirmations triggering internal cleanups. Every strand left behind rewrote the infrastructure's own history. "Very," Tarn called. "Status. Bisprate saturation achieved. Dominion communication hubs, now processing their own firewalls as malware. Duration? 4 cycles before they realize they're blind." On the far side of the operations pit, Kelric Joran toggled a graviton calibration spool. The lenses weren't visible, stored inside cryomagnet casings, but the chamber's temperature dropped regardless. These weren't orbital weapons in the traditional sense. Each unit compressed field boundaries around gravity cores, accelerating collapse potential. Not intended to destroy ships, designed to erase nav points. Kelric spoke only once. "Lenses resonate at 40%. We breach containment at 75. "Noted," Tarn replied, returning to the central command ring. Above, suspended in vacuum-coupled launch shells, the Earth fleet drifted in patternless alignment. Each cruiser followed no symmetrical vector. Every assault wing spun independently, randomizing their quantum rotation. Pattern evasion wasn't protocol, it was doctrine. Predictability was treason. "Relays mapped for ascent points Alpha through Theta," the navigation lead reported. "All linked assets ready." Corvin Dax entered without announcement. The doors didn't hiss. They retracted with magnet locks too smooth for sound. "You sent the pulse?" Tarn asked. Corvin approached the viewport overlooking the staging arrays. "Yes. They heard it. They don't understand it, but they felt it." Tarn didn't turn. "Good." A field technician gestured toward the auxiliary bay. "Commander, Junction Node 7 is registering a Concord tracer near Io. No approach signal. Intercept with Ghost Carrier 2, Tarn ordered. Inject the decoy script. Let them think it's ours and let it vanish the moment they log it." The technician nodded and disappeared through a side hatch. Every word spoken, every step taken inside the bastion existed for one function: escalation without alarm. This was not retaliation. It was administration. The heads-up display updated again. One segment blinked in orange. Omega node activation pending. Varen tapped a final sequence. His terminal flashed white once before clearing. "Omega node is online," he said. "We've mirrored 3 Concord fleet control systems. They'll respond to commands they never issued." "Derek?" Tarn asked into the command uplink. "Munition stacks are live," Supply Commander Jarek Sullivan responded from an echo-shielded warbay. "Cryo-pulse torpedoes charged. Nanite vaults prepped. Blast chamber coils are stress-locked and green. Load graviton warheads in secondaries only. Save the primary cores for hard targets." "Understood." Tarn turned back to Corvin. "You prepared for their reaction?" Corvin didn't answer immediately. He studied the data storm threading the system overlays. "They'll call it overreach. Panic disguised as arrogance. Threats are what they understand. Coordination is what they fear." "Then show them both," Tarn said. A row of technicians shifted in unison, as if a single thought passed across their stations. None asked questions. Kelrick's readout signaled completion. "Graviton arrays at 75, holding stabilization, lock windows open in 30. Tarn approached the launch directive panel. He placed his hand across the console again. 3 sectors first, he said. "Only those with command presence, no population targets." "You're giving them a chance to watch it happen," Corvin remarked. "I'm giving them time to remember who they provoked." The console accepted his imprint. Cross-Sol, Ashfall transitioned from theory to movement. Above Neptune, a Null Veil cruiser repositioned using no thrusters. Its pathway bent without curvature, as if the ship had ceased to believe in inertia. 3 strike formations realigned behind exofield distortions. No messages, no staging signals, just location changes that didn't adhere to known physics. Tarn turned to the wardeck liaison. "Mark all outbound trajectories. When Gravitas breach containment, disable tracking. The targets should vanish with them." "Yes, sir." In the command pit, Varen leaned back, removing the gloves. His hands trembled slightly, not from fatigue, but from voltage delay. Corvin approached him. "You wrote the exit lines. Feeling poetic?" Varen gave a short exhale. "It's not poetry if it's written in algorithms." Corvin nodded and turned away. The chamber dimmed to combat red. Tarn's voice passed across every deck. "Initiate Phase 1. Remove observation nodes. Collapse their view before their reach." On the projection wall, the first gravitational disruption formed. A sphere of negative displacement expanded, devouring sensor threads like ink dropped into water. The countdown began. 12 seconds to detonation. Tarn watched the cascading heads-up indicators flatten as conquered pathways blinked out. 10 seconds. The lights across the tactical table froze. 9. Corvin stepped away, heading toward the auxiliary relay station. "Give them nothing they can explain," Tarn muttered. "Release." Tarn Vaylor's final command echoed down the command shaft, reaching launch control through an encrypted signal path that fragmented into hundreds of smaller strands, each routed to a different node across Earth's orbital defense grid. The countdown hit 0. 3 systems died in parallel. Sector Velen 3, a Concord defense ring stationed around the twin gas giants of the Trelac Rift, registered no warning as 4 cryo-pulse torpedoes pierced its outer perimeter. The torpedoes didn't detonate on contact. They dispersed sub-zero kinetic agents mid-sleet, coating the station's hulls with molecular ice layers that bored inward. Within 6 seconds, thermal equilibrium inside the central habitat plunged into negative triple digits. Biological material froze faster than systems could lock down. Skin cracked, lungs collapsed, ocular tissue shattered under pressure differentials. Officers and command pods became statues, wrapped in frost, frozen mid-reach, mid-blink, mid-thought. No one screamed. The air intake valves had already crystallized. Sector Drayan 4. Graviton lances, activated at threshold distance. They did not fire beams. They bent localized gravity in sharp compression zones, warping matter against its own inertia. Concorde battlecruiser Valor Breaker imploded mid-broadside. Its armor buckled inward, hull fractures forming spirals along the ship's spine. Deck plating folded like scorched paper before the superstructure gave way entirely. The fleet's second-in-command watched his escort ship tear itself apart in fractured acceleration, unable to process what weapon had been used. His own vessel, Apex Judgment, vanished 22 seconds later. No debris. Sector Marvek 6. Quantum shards embedded into Concorde relay satellites activated inside reactor cores. Each shard, a sphere of atomic displacement woven into shape MME polymers, reacted to structural heat, then split into hundreds of filaments. Those filaments unraveled inside shield generators, rewiring the energy cycles in microbursts of kinetic noise. The shielding failed not outward but inward. Concorde's planetary defense grid powered up as if to block an external barrage. Instead, the emitters focused inward, collapsing over the command building like a net of white heat. Control personnel had a single frame of awareness before the station's dome incinerated from the inside. Sensors picked up the energy discharge as self-inflicted. Review boards would find no trace of sabotage. Across all 3 sectors, Concorde Command received the same outcome: connection lost. They didn't hear an alarm. They received dead data nodes. Nodes that simply stopped updating. Not red, not blinking, not frozen, just absent. At Valor Command Post, a coordinator whispered to her terminal assistant, "How do 3 sectors drop in less than 1 orbital cycle?" The assistant didn't answer. His screen displayed shattered constellation maps, routes broken mid-sector, navigation symbols floating unattached to known stars. At Halari Naval Archive, systems analyst Tren Volsar stared at archival footage recovered from the Trilak Rift. No live video, just telemetry. He replayed the last 3 seconds of the station logs on a restricted guess terminal. 1.8 cententure anomaly detected in atmospheric regulators. DPF read 9S, exterior comm plates read power increase. Expected radiation, none. 0.1S. Feed ends. No physical collision recorded. He sat back. Behind his chair, 2 engineers argued over whether the system had suffered a cosmic event. Tren didn't join the debate, he knew better. Cosmic events didn't carry Earth-catered encryption in their thermal metadata. Sector Helvan 2 hours later. The last remaining patrol frigate in the outer ring received partial footage from the Apex Judgment's black box before its carrier drone failed. One frame showed the Graviton Lance's effect at mid-strike. The ship's visual log caught a flash. Not of light, but of bent matter forming concentric warps across its flank, like a ripple pressed into steel. 2 nanoseconds after the ripple formed, the ship folded inward. The image stuttered and vanished. Earth never issued a statement. Concorde High Council met in emergency session. Members arrived wearing protocol robes, but half hadn't even reviewed the reports. They expected weapons. They got dismantlement. No enemy ships had entered the registered space. No kinetic barrage had lit up sensor walls. No warning had traveled ahead of the devastation. Counselor Drake Solvar of the Runic Assembly scanned the incident maps with trembling fingers. "Deep Sark raids," he muttered. Counselor Vartran of the Carduan block looked up. "What are they, then?" Drake swallowed. "Corrections." The council chamber fell to administrative muttering. Commands were drafted. Emergency alerts queued. None were received by the second wave of Concorde sectors. Ashfall had already rerouted their quantum networks, but not jammed. Reflected. At Stratcom Bastion, Tarn reviewed the zero-phase data. The heads-up display painted a cold diagram. 3 Concorde sectors, dead nodes. 16 active beacons corrupted. 28 major supply relays stalled mid-cycle. Next targets? He asked without turning. Kelrick Jorn spoke from calibration. 7 high-density fleet hubs, minimal civilian overlap, targeting solutions mapped, coil-back interference within threshold. Varan Koss added from his alcove. Dominion flagship communications now looping back their own alerts. They're reading last week's rotations. Jarek Sullivan uploaded a second payload map. Cryopulse torpedoes on standby. Graviton lances calibrated for rotating pattern strike. Quantum shards recharged. Corvin Dax walked in and placed a data slate on the operations desk. He didn't speak. Tarn picked it up. It displayed a grid of species crests. The Concorde's most influential blocks. He tapped 1. Send the next sequence, collapse the lighthouses. Targets locked, Varan confirmed. Deploy shock formation. Entry vectors remain unchanged. Commander Marin Tavik issued the order without shifting his footing. The wind across Varnak Prime's upper plateau sliced between marble towers, kicking fine debris into lines against the outer wall. Behind him, columns of Earth's Vanguard Division advanced in regulated intervals, each step calibrated to terrain slope, elevation shift, and orbital alignment. No battle cry, no banners. The old Unity Plaza rose ahead like a corpse dressed for ceremony. Its monument still bore inscriptions of interspecies treaties, now faded beneath smoke and thermal scarring. A central statue, Concorde's founding triad, had partially collapsed. One pedestal remained upright, its laurel crown scorched and half fused to the base. Tavik gave no salute. Phase 1, spatial clearing, begin sweep. Pulse cascade cannons discharged across the flanks, not in arcs but layered sheets of vibrational energy. The effect wasn't explosive. Walls sheared apart under directed pressure, collapsing into strips. A row of buildings, previously military housing, folded inward, support joints fracturing under destabilized resonance. Tavik motioned left. Breach north corridor, no interior holds permitted. Squads moved with pinpoint pacing. No deviation. They didn't shout commands. Every order traveled through internal lattice feeds. Each unit received haptic confirmation via calibrated dermal implants. 1 step, clear. 2 steps, scan. 3, pulse charge. Concorde's command center on Varnak hadn't been abandoned. It was decommissioned in panic. Datapads still rested on conference tables. Breakfast trays congealed under dust. Exit logs showed staff evacuations initiated 22 minutes before Earth's descent. They didn't resist. They didn't entrench. They ran. Tavik stopped at the dais in the center of the plaza. Earth's field analysts had already flagged the site for core value erasure. Execute flag point, purge. Technicians planted data pikes, short rods with crystallized storage cores, into the stone base beneath the monument. Each one carried false archives. Concorde's history, rewritten to record internal collapse, not external attack. The pikes broadcast those records for 6 hours before collapsing into self-consuming loops. By the time Concorde's forensic teams arrived, their own systems would show the destruction as instigated by administrative fault. On Selvek, the air hung heavier. Agricultural humidity systems had been modified by Earth's infiltration teams 3 days prior to deployment. Their software introduced a slight compound shift, a trace filament added to nutrient vapor. It carried no odor, triggered no alarm. Its function was simple: render polymer-based control systems non-conductive. When Earth's forces landed, Selvek's command grid didn't power up. The biodomes blacked out in sequence. Artificial forests withered under heat exchange failure. Vertical seed towers ignited from inside. No munitions were used. Just cascading failure by design. Squads in terrain suits advanced between blistered infrastructure. Commander Tavik reviewed the overhead heads-up layout. Sector Delta 2 is in blackout. Initiate sweep with fire scrub drones. Confirm route erasure. Drone teams moved in circular paths, laying thermal lines that burned biomass growths from their stem to root core. Each pass stripped decades of genetic engineering from the surface. By the hour's end, Selvex's entire agricultural lattice, its pride, its economy, its diplomatic strength, was a barren grid. Tavik received 3 surrender attempts. He ignored them. He hadn't been authorized to receive negotiations. Pilar collapsed differently. Tavik's infiltration team had mapped its energy nexus 6 weeks prior. The nexus didn't just power cities. It linked their atmospheric regulators to their orbital docks. One cascading input fed into the nexus hub during a maintenance cycle, rerouted every control signal through Earth's subroutine core. When the order came down, Tavik gave no countdown. Belar's sky turned gray. Across the capital, emergency sirens failed to initialize. Streetlights blinked in reverse patterns. Doors jammed. Climate regulators dropped their sync timing, triggering heat waves in ice districts and cold compression in tropical zones. Orbiting vessels reported that ground signals looped endlessly. Open, but unreceivable. The capital's internal grid collapsed from inversion, not destruction. The city suffocated on its own autonomy. Tavik's forces entered through 6 breach points. No combat met them, just shadows of collapse. They moved sector by sector, each squad with a designated strip, each building logged, cleared, processed, tagged. Residents fled, if they could. Those that didn't simply watched from windows. Some stood on rooftops. Some knelt in old religious circles. None were stopped. Tavik had no directive to engage non-combatants. No interest in their words. One Dalari elder dropped to his knees and offered coordinates of a hidden Concord depot. Tavik walked past him. By nightfall, Earth's ground division stood across 3 Concord capitals. None flew flags. None left graffiti. No banners were raised. Only markers remained. Data pikes, embedded in public squares, broadcasting declassified internal Concord failures compiled by Earth's AI divisions. Truthful failures, collected over decades, repurposed to imply systemic rot. Old Concord banners, those with symbols of unity, were removed from walls, rolled, and stabbed through with the same pikes. They weren't burned, they weren't torn. They were cataloged, archived, and left as visual evidence of what had crumbled. No voice announced victory. No anthem played. Tavik stood beneath the remnants of Unity Plaza, the heat of the collapsed monument still bleeding through his boots. A young officer approached. Remaining orbital outposts report no movement. Reinforcements are 37 hours out. Tavik checked his interface feed. Leave before they arrive. Lock re-entry points. We don't need a standoff. What about the civilians? They'll govern themselves, Tavik replied. We didn't come to replace rulers. As he walked back toward the transport node, the plaza behind him fell dark, doors unsealed. The shuttle operator's voice crackled once in Corvin Dax's earpiece before cutting off. He stood alone at the edge of the landing platform above Verdanus Prime's former Concord Hall, wind tugging at the hem of his coat. No escort followed. No Terran craft hovered in airspace. The descent was unannounced, without formation, without code. He stepped forward. The stairs descending into the plaza were no longer guarded by statues. They lay toppled across the entrance slope. Their marble torsos snapped at the spine, limbs jutting at off angles like discarded mannequins. Rain fell in thin, diagonal lines, slicking the shattered mosaics underfoot. Puddles reflected broken emblems from the Concord's founding banners, now faded to indistinct patterns beneath soot. He didn't look down. A few surviving members of the outer council watched from rooftops. No one spoke. One turned away. Another pulled up his collar and backed into the recess of a doorway. Corvin walked between blackened support columns. He passed the skeleton of the Vecran delegation's elevated platform, its ornate shielding glass melted and sagging, like molasses frozen mid-drip. The flooring creaked under his boots, not from fragility, but from the shift of ash layering over polished granite. The inner chamber awaited. The once majestic dome above the Concord dais had collapsed inward, letting weather reclaim its space. Rain pattered through openings in the roof, dripping in steady rhythms onto the fractured speaker's stand. Half of the original light columns had collapsed. The remaining ones, now hollowed from within, leaned like brittle reeds after a storm. Corvin stopped at the foot of the dais. He reached into his coat. From within, folded precisely, rested the Earth Seal banner. He drew it out with both hands, the cloth compressed tight into a square no larger than his forearm. The rain struck its surface without darkening it. The weave was hydrophobic, woven from Earth's polar thread mills 2 centuries ago. Silver linings stitched along the edges shimmered faintly beneath the overcast. He ascended the cracked stairs. No voice accompanied him, no ceremonial music. The only sound was the rainfall, collecting at the chamber's edges where the walls had fractured. Mud streamed through the eastern break in the foundation, where once the guest dignitaries entered. Earth's own seat was gone, not removed, but crushed under part of the roof. He reached the stand. With care, he knelt. Not as a priest, not as a penitent, but as one ensuring the task was done with care. He laid the banner across the stone podium. It unfurled with weight. No gust lifted its corners. The threads clung to the surface with natural grip, the sigil of Earth pressing downward as if the gravity here had shifted, favoring one world alone. Corvin stood. Water ran down the back of his neck, seeping through the collar seam. He let it pass. Across from him, a fallen column crackled, an exposed data conduit still attempting to reroute power. The error display blinked red once, then faded. He turned. A child stood in the ruins of the western corridor. Small, barefoot, holding a tattered datapad. The child didn't move forward, didn't speak, just watched. Corvin's gaze lingered for a moment. Then he descended, one step at a time, never glancing back. The Earth Seal banner remained, not as a warning, not as a threat, as acknowledgement. Behind him, the rain struck harder, pushing soot into the gutter cracks, scrubbing the stone with indifference. He reached the base of the stairs. The Concord historian hidden beneath the collapsed vestibule leaned forward, eyes wide. Her recording device was already running. She dared not interrupt, she simply documented. Corvin walked past her. She said nothing. At the far edge of the plaza, a Corinne survivor rested against a fractured column, arm wrapped in a makeshift sling. His gaze met Corvin's as he passed. No words were exchanged. They didn't need to be. He continued toward the edge of the platform where the shuttle awaited. The door remained open. The engines hadn't powered down, but no noise emanated. Earth's new propulsion systems worked through folded space compression. No flame, no vibration. Just waiting momentum. Before stepping aboard, Corvin paused. Behind him, the hall no longer loomed. It merely existed. An empty ribcage of a creature that had once roared. The lights overhead no longer flickered. No one issued commands. He entered the craft. The door sealed with a magnetic latching gesture. No hiss, no theatrical cue. The ship rose. Below, the banner held firm under the rain. Concord records show no current threat. Stated log entry 9. 741. From Outpost Keltron 3. The words were typed, not spoken. There were no officers left to read them aloud. The station's central atrium now housed supply crates stacked 5 high, each bearing faded crests of former council blocks. Where proclamations had once scrolled across glowing plinths, now sat clipped maintenance schedules and harvest inventories. The chamber smelled of coolant leaks and thermal dust from the generators, keeping lights running on half-cycle power. No announcements echoed, no directives carried from floor to floor. Motion detectors recorded fewer than a dozen individuals moving per hour across what used to house hundreds. The speaker dais in the upper ring was repurposed into a ration assembly station. In place of the Concorde banner hung a length of jet black cloth, nailed at the corners, flapping slightly each time the hatch cycle engaged. The cloth bore no symbol. That was the point. On Traxxas 8, the Education Bureau was shuttered. Where schoolchildren once studied diplomatic history, they now traced routes across cracked tablets and old consoles salvaged from diplomatic archives. One image remained, embedded into the home screen. A still frame of the Earth Seal banner resting on the Concorde dais. The children had no context, only reverence. In one home, a small group of students gathered before the display, heads bowed not in worship but curiosity. None spoke. The instructor didn't force questions. They were learning through absence. On Hellerus Ring Station, the last trade union reconvened to finalize transit permissions. The chamber once used for negotiation had been converted into a quarantine bay during the first Cascade event. No one bothered to sanitize it after. They simply cleared the debris, installed folding chairs, and activated the laser grid projectors. The meeting logs didn't name Earth, not once. But every proposed policy was reviewed under one filter. Would this draw their attention? Nothing was signed without that phrase whispered at least once. At the edge of the room, Representative Jovex of the Tharn system scrawled a draft pact with a repurposed stylus onto uncoded screen plate. No digital backup was taken. Paper felt more secure. In the corner of the slate he pressed his thumbprint, then turned the tablet face down. Just in case. Planetary Governor Lestrom of Velen II entered the Grand Assembly Hall with a bowed head. The dais still bore the scorch marks from the initial shutdown, the exact spot where the emergency override had failed to prevent atmospheric loss. No restoration had been attempted. The hall operated now on residual energy from external cores. He didn't speak to his aides. He walked to the foot of the podium, removed his crest pin, and placed it on the central step. Behind him, attendants documented the action. No one clapped. One child in the observation ring stood and began folding a strip of black paper into a triangle. The act wasn't taught. In spread. Merchant Guild Packet 442ZZ filed an update stating, "Avoid the central corridors of Varnak sector. Unstable routes." The report did not mention the absence of conflict or the emptiness of the lanes. Traders simply refused to cross sectors where Earth's fleets had once moved. Insurance firms revised coverage limits, no official reason, just higher premiums if traveling through Earth-lagged zones. One captain, during routine surveillance scan, logged the image of an Earth dropship wreck. Still intact, buried in a crater filled with mineral slurry. The ship was unpowered, unguarded. The file was never shared. He deleted it before re-entry. He didn't want the responsibility of knowing. On Selvek, community leaders gathered in a burned-out forum where the Agricultural Council once distributed weather algorithms. They sat in a circle on improvised cushions made from shredded wiring insulation. There was no agenda. One elder lit a single bulb from a cracked conduit casing, hanging it above them on a salvaged rail hook. It buzzed slightly. They passed a scrap of cloth between them. Coarse black fabric torn from an old environmental uniform. No flag, no emblem. They didn't say Earth's name. They didn't need to. On the fourth floor of the ruins of Verdani's Prime's Concorde Hall, an archivist in a tattered coat uploaded his final collection to the surviving database sector. He labeled it, Memory Doctrine, Post-E3 Structure Unclassified. He didn't encrypt it. He didn't password it. He simply logged each entry with location, timestamp, and observation. 1 read. Bernick Prime. Plaza cleared. Locals plant moss where columns used to stand. No banners raised. Rainfall has washed the last emblem into drainage. Child found stitching silver threads into floor cloth. No one taught her. Another. Ellery Docks. Two former fleet engineers return to refit hulls for grain shipments. One wears a pin with Earth's seal on the inside of his jacket. Refuses to explain why. In the Conquer's old central AI management node, once responsible for sector-wide announcements, emergency triggers, and legislative dissemination, an automated subroutine triggered at 200. The system was set to auto-renew status alerts for diplomatic readiness. This cycle, it failed. Error. Node routing conflict. Cannot verify contact authority. A technician from Valor rerouted the signal to a static dump. The dump log read, Advisory. Earth does not broadcast. Earth remembers. Proceed accordingly. He read it twice. Then he disabled the relay. At a repurposed comms relay tower on Ralvan 3, a minor diplomat asked the operator, "If they don't speak, how do we know what they want?" The operator paused before replying. Ellie already showed us. Cease field continuity, withdraw remaining nodes. Tarn Vaylor's command was transmitted directly through Earth's encrypted subnet. The routing bypassed all satellite echo trails, leaving no traceable signal path. In Stratcom Bastion's lowest command tier, automated personnel frameworks retracted one by one, each tagged with Operation Complete status and overwritten with termination flags. No ceremony followed. Corvin Dax stepped into the control bay, glancing once at the primary heads-up display as the last Null Veil squadron exited orbital lock. He didn't comment on the symmetry of the drawdown. None of them had ever needed aesthetic reward. They've pulled their patrols back from the outer ring, he reported. Tarn acknowledged without looking. They're not reorganizing. They're reducing exposure. They've learned. They've adapted, Tarn corrected, but not enough to qualify as corrected. Stratcom's infrastructure began shutting down from its core outward. One layer at a time, defense matrices folded. Network synchronizers went dormant. Long-range transmission cords transferred their logs to deep storage, sealed beneath biometric encryptions that would require simultaneous input from both men to access again. They would never do so. All across the galaxy, Earth's operations disengaged, not with retreating fleets or broadcast statements, but through absence of interference. Monitoring posts erased their own coordinates. Relay buoys collapsed into inert cores and drifted into gravity wells. The movement wasn't graceful or symbolic. It was procedural. At Observation Gate R92, an automated courier left behind by Earth powered down and injected its own firmware into the primary planetary archive. The file wasn't encrypted. It didn't contain threats or ultimatums. It was a plain text log of names, timestamps, and unresolved violations from conquered member states. The document ended with a 3-line audit note. Engagement completed, mission parameters fulfilled, memory retention advised. No origin was listed. The system registered it as internal. Across 5 former Concord sectors, planetary governors met in private assemblies. None summoned Earth representatives. No one dared to. They did not debate retaliation. There was nothing to retaliate against. No territory was taken. No ultimatum left to defy. They voted only on one matter: whether to reactivate broadcast beacons that once connected them to their neighboring sectors. All chose abstention. On Valor, the restored communications array was booted into diagnostic mode for the first time in 4 months. It ran internal loops. No external contacts were reached. The technician in charge logged the outcome, wrote a single line: "Outbound restricted, pending reconsideration." Then closed the log without submitting it. Further west, a former Conquered High Council dome on Drabix collapsed under unchecked vine growth. The building had not been bombed. No weapon had touched it. But without data flow, power, or updates from centralized command, its interior systems shut down weeks earlier. The walls degraded under natural pressure and moisture buildup. No one attempted repairs. The statue outside, once an ornate depiction of the founding declaration, was cut into 3 parts and moved to a nearby shelter depot. The base was left empty. A child was seen standing on it the following day holding a paper square stitched with silver wire. She asked no questions. On a converted freighter in neutral space, a merchant captain transmitted his daily trade log. He reached a flagged coordinate on the nav chart, formerly part of a high-traffic corridor, and turned away before entering. No new rule compelled him. No interdiction field blocked passage. He simply didn't want to cross a region where reports said nothing had happened but fleets stopped returning. The galaxy had adjusted. Earth had not taken power. It had demonstrated that it didn't need to. At the final command cycle inside Stratcom Bastion, Corvin entered the lower observation vault for the last time. Tarn was already there, reviewing the shutdown sequence as automated drones finalized Bastion's lockout. "Any remaining points of access?" Corvin asked. "None that aren't buried 3 tiers deep," Tarn said. "And if they dig, let them." Corvin approached the edge of the viewport, watching frost begin to spread across the outer containment doors. "This will outlive us." "That was always the point," Tarn replied. "They didn't believe we'd leave. They thought we needed validation. But validation is for children. Fear is temporary," Corvin said. "Documentation is eternal." Tarn pressed his palm to the command node. "Then we're done." The facility's reactor core shifted into entombment mode. One layer at a time, reinforced alloy gates sealed the corridors, locking Bastion into an underground vault that no map documented and no signal marked. Atmospheric harmonizers closed the final outer iris. The station faded beneath Earth's ice crust. No sound followed. The last display on the heads-up system showed the sector index. Each location where Earth's forces had operated was tagged with a new status label. Active presence, none. Record said, authorization withdrawn. Recall conditions, N/A. Corvin and Tarn exited the command floor. They spoke no final words. Not out of restraint, but because there was nothing left to say. Their actions would not be forgotten. Not in this century. Not in the one after. They entered the final transport module and departed. There was no pursuit. No parting speech. No banner raised. Only unalterable reality. In every charted star system once touched by Earth's operatives, one term replaced the Concorde's diplomatic header. Sector designation, do not engage. And under that, in smaller type, Record Custodian, Terran.